It all began on a seemingly ordinary evening in late March. The night sky above Earth was calm, unbroken by the usual hustle and bustle of space exploration. It was just another routine day in the world of humanity's ventures into the unknown. Yet, deep in the heart of a vast, secure satellite listening post in the remote Siberian wilderness, something extraordinary was detected. A signal, an anomaly. At first, it was faint, almost imperceptible, a mere whisper in the infinite void. But as the seconds turned into minutes, the signal grew stronger, more defined. It was a rhythmic pulse, a repeating pattern so complex that no human-made device could have replicated it. Dr. Elena Vasiliev, the lead scientist at the facility, was the first to notice it. She had been tracking space debris, monitoring communications between satellites, and conducting routine experiments, but this was different. The signal wasn't from any known star system or artificial source. It was deliberate, intelligent. After confirming the authenticity of the signal, she called her team together. "I think we've just found the first evidence of extraterrestrial life," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the magnitude of the discovery. Her colleagues gathered around her, staring at the readings on the monitor. They had been receiving bursts of this signal for weeks, but no one had been able to identify it until now. As they analyzed the pattern, the implications became clear. The signal wasn't just a random occurrence. It was a message, a sequence of data meant for them, meant for humanity. The tone of the pulses, the intervals, the shifts in frequency, all of it spoke to a civilization far more advanced than their own. Yet there was something else that both fascinated and terrified Elena. The signal didn't appear to be coming from deep space, where humanity had sent probes and telescopes to peer into the vast reaches of the cosmos. No, the source was far closer. It was as if the message had been coming from the very stars themselves, yet the signals were bouncing from hidden points, converging near Earth. She knew that if her calculations were correct, the true origin of the signal was somewhere just outside the Earth's atmosphere. Someone, had been watching. The idea that extraterrestrials might be closer than humanity ever imagined sent waves of shock through Elena's mind. It wasn't just the possibility of contact, it was the realization that, if this signal was being sent deliberately, they weren't the first to notice. Someone, somewhere, was aware of them, aware of Earth. And they had been waiting. The team worked through the night, desperately trying to decode the message. They realized it wasn't a simple transmission. It was layered, encoded in a way that hinted at an intelligence far beyond the human mind. The message wasn't just an invitation to communicate. It was more like a signal of presence. The Earth had been watched for thousands of years, and now, the time had come for humanity to finally know it. When the decoded message arrived on the screen, Elena's breath caught in her throat. The message wasn't composed of letters or numbers or any known language. It was something else. Patterns that seemed to flow like intricate, geometric designs, filled with patterns and rhythms that hummed with meaning. There was one phrase, though, at the end of the transmission, that humanity could understand. "We have always been here." The moment the message was sent to global governments and space agencies, the world was thrown into chaos. Was it a hoax, a cosmic trick, or had humanity just received the first proof that they were not alone in the universe? Governments scrambled to respond. Agencies coordinated across borders, and secret meetings were held in darkened rooms. But one thing was certain. The Earth was no longer the quiet, isolated planet it once had been. Something, or someone, had been here all along, watching, waiting. And now, humanity had been found. But the question that lingered in the air, unanswered, was this: why? Why had they watched for so long, and why reveal themselves now? Was this a sign of friendship, or was it the first step toward something far more sinister? The world held its breath, waiting for the next move, and the aliens, wherever they were, waited too. The revelation that Earth was not alone in the universe set off a global wildfire of fear, excitement, and confusion. For days, the world's leaders held emergency summits, Scientific communities debated the meaning of the message, and the media speculated on everything from peaceful alliances to imminent alien invasion. Governments scrambled to form coalitions, trying to figure out what steps they should take next. The United Nations held an emergency session, where the entire world watched as the leaders of Earth debated whether to respond to the message or remain silent. But it wasn't just governments and scientists that reacted. The message had sparked an unprecedented wave of public interest. People from all corners of the globe began forming their own theories about the aliens. Conspiracy theorists flooded the internet with wild speculations, some claiming the aliens had been influencing humanity's history from the shadows, pushing civilizations to evolve in a particular direction for reasons unknown. Religious groups debated whether this was a sign of divine intervention or proof of a higher extraterrestrial intelligence. Others argued that humanity had been deceived for millennia and that the alien presence had been manipulating them for some dark purpose. In the quiet of an old government bunker, Dr. Elena found herself in a dark corner of the room, staring at the screen in front of her. The decoded message had haunted her every waking moment. "We have always been here." What did it mean? Who were they? And if they had been watching for thousands of years, why hadn't they intervened before? Were they simply observers, like distant gods, or did they have more tangible plans? It was in that moment that Elena's thoughts were interrupted by a call from the higher-ups at the United Nations. They were forming a global council on the situation, and Elena was being invited to represent the scientific community. She had become one of the world's foremost experts on the signal, and they needed her input. She agreed, though she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that something bigger, something more dangerous, was unfolding. 2 weeks later, the United Nations convened the first ever global summit with the alien message at its center. The world's leading experts gathered in a colossal conference room in Geneva, surrounded by security forces and political advisors. Every eye was on the digital screens projecting Elena's research, and the audience was desperate for answers. Would humanity learn the truth about the aliens, or was this just the beginning of something far darker? "Thank you, Dr. Vasiliev, for your analysis," said the UN Secretary General, his voice trembling slightly as he looked over the crowded hall. "Now, it's time for us to hear from those who might know more. Those who may have been in contact with these extraterrestrials before." The room fell silent. A dozen strange individuals entered the room, each cloaked in dark, hooded garments. Their faces remained obscured, but their presence was unmistakably otherworldly. These figures had been brought in from secret locations: scientists, former military officials, and experts who had been working with the message in secret for decades. They were part of a shadow organization that had been monitoring the aliens long before the public discovery. One of the cloaked figures stepped forward. His voice was steady, confident, and strangely calm as he spoke to the world for the first time. "Humanity has been observed for far longer than you can imagine," he said. "We were the first to detect their presence, and we have been watching, learning. The aliens, the ones who sent that message, have been with us since the dawn of civilization." A hushed murmur spread through the room. The man continued, revealing information that made the already surreal situation even more perplexing. "They've guided us," he said, "not with obvious intervention, but subtly. They've influenced technological advancements, scientific discoveries, even our social structures. The rise of empires, the fall of civilizations, the sudden leaps in human development, these were not coincidences. The aliens have been pushing us forward, nudging us toward progress, helping us avoid our worst instincts. They've been watching us closely, waiting for the moment to reveal themselves." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. Then, in an eerie calmness, he added, "But they are not our saviors. They are not benevolent gods. Their motives are complex. They have not intervened out of kindness. They've been preparing us for something." A chill ran down Elena's spine. Something. That one word had the power to freeze the air in the room. It suggested a purpose, a goal, that humanity could not yet comprehend. And as the man's hooded figure retreated back into the shadows, A dozen more voices echoed across the globe, each warning of the same thing. The aliens had not come to save humanity. They had been shaping it for an unknown future. The world was left in a state of stunned silence. Some felt relief. Finally, they understood the true nature of humanity's history and its connection to these extraterrestrial observers. But for others, fear began to creep in. What had the aliens been preparing humanity for? Why reveal themselves now? At that very moment, as the world pondered these questions, a new message arrived. Another pulse, this one stronger than before, reverberated across every device capable of receiving it. It was a warning, but no one could decipher its meaning. Only one thing was clear: it was different from the first. The aliens weren't done yet. They were just getting started. In the days following the revelation of the aliens' influence, the world was paralyzed by uncertainty. Governments tried to maintain a semblance of control, but beneath the surface, an underlying panic began to rise. If the aliens had been shaping humanity's development for thousands of years, what else had they done? Had they simply been observing, or had they been subtly pulling the strings all along? Dr. Elena, who had once been at the forefront of uncovering the truth, now found herself at the center of a storm. The scientific community was divided. Some hailed her as the savior who had exposed the hidden truth, while others criticized her for making the world aware of something they weren't ready to understand. But Elena had always been driven by one thing: the truth. And now, she felt that the truth was more complicated than she had ever imagined. It was a week after the summit when Elena received a private message from an unknown source. The message was simple, yet its contents shook her to the core. You are not the first to question the nature of their influence. The message came with no return address, no signature, only a set of coordinates and a time, an invitation of sorts. Elena's first instinct was to dismiss it as a hoax or a prank, but something about it felt too precise, too calculated. She shared the message with a few trusted colleagues, who urged her to be cautious. Yet, her curiosity got the better of her. With no official authorization, Elena made the decision to follow the coordinates. The location led her to an abandoned military facility deep in the Arctic. It was a place she had read about in old intelligence reports, an isolated outpost that had been decommissioned in the late 20th century. No one had been there for years, and it had always been shrouded in mystery. When she arrived, the place felt eerily empty, the silence pressing down on her like a weight. As she ventured deeper into the facility, Elena encountered strange markings on the walls, symbols that she recognized from the alien message. The same geometric patterns, the same rhythmic pulsations, as if the message had been embedded into the very structure of this place long before humanity even knew it existed. Then, as if on cue, a door at the far end of the room slid open, revealing a darkened chamber. Inside, a figure stood waiting. It was another cloaked individual, but this time, there was something different about him. The air around him seemed to shimmer, as though reality itself was bending. Elena, the figure spoke, his voice mechanical yet strangely warm. I knew you would come. Who are you? Elena asked, her heart pounding. What is this place? We are the keepers, the figure replied. We've watched for centuries, observing, guiding, and waiting for the right moment. The aliens who have been monitoring your planet, they are not the only ones. Elena's mind raced. What do you mean? The aliens? They're not the only ones? Who are you? The keeper stepped forward, his face still hidden beneath the cloak, and with a subtle gesture, he revealed a holographic map. At first glance, it looked like a series of constellations, but as Elena focused, she noticed something odd. The stars were positioned in a pattern that didn't align with any known celestial map. There were lines, connections between the stars, some of which intersected with Earth's history at crucial moments. These beings, our ancient ancestors, have been watching you, not just from the stars, but from the shadows. They are the true architects of your civilization, the keeper explained. They've been manipulating the flow of history, nudging you toward progress and evolution, but always with a purpose. The aliens you've encountered. They are merely one part of a much larger picture. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. This was not just about alien influence. This was something deeper, something older. Why? Why have they done this? And why reveal themselves now? Elena asked, her voice trembling with the enormity of the question. The aliens you've contacted, they are part of a greater order. They've kept humanity on a path toward a critical juncture. You see, this moment, your moment, it's not random. It's the culmination of thousands of years of planning, subtle manipulation, and influence. And now, as the Earth's knowledge reaches a certain level, the time has come for you to choose, the Keeper said, his eyes hidden but his words sharp and final. Choose? Elena asked, bewildered. Choose what? The Keeper's eyes flickered with a strange light, and for the first time, Elena felt a twinge of fear. You will decide if humanity is ready for what comes next. The aliens are not here to conquer, nor are they here to uplift you. They are preparing you for a new phase, one that requires a choice. A choice that will determine the future of your world, and of all worlds. Elena's heart raced. This was more than just a meeting between species. This was a revelation of something far greater, a cosmic plan in motion that humanity could not yet comprehend. I don't understand, she whispered. What choice? The Keeper's voice dropped to a near whisper. You will understand soon enough. The question is whether humanity will be ready to face it when the time comes. As the Keeper's words hung in the air, Elena felt a deep sense of dread settle in her chest. The aliens, the Keepers, the mysterious forces that had shaped Earth's history, they had been preparing for something. Something that now seemed unavoidable. And as Elena turned to leave the facility, she realized that the true nature of the aliens' influence wasn't just about guiding humanity's development. It was about creating a moment in time when humanity would have to confront the unknown and make a decision that would shape the fate of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. The clock was ticking. The time was near. The days following Elena's visit to the Arctic facility were a blur. The Keeper's words echoed in her mind, replaying over and over. You will choose. But choose what? And how could humanity? How could she possibly understand what that choice was, let alone make it? After returning to Moscow, Elena struggled to make sense of everything. She had shared the cryptic message from the Keeper with only a few trusted individuals, but even they were at a loss for answers. In a world that was already grappling with the shock of extraterrestrial revelation, this new layer of complexity only deepened the mystery. Yet, the time to act was growing short. In the weeks that followed, strange things began to happen. Communications from the alien source became more frequent. Anomalous messages that were at times puzzling, at times unsettling. They were not just observational anymore, they were direct. The first of these messages arrived as a transmission to Earth's leading scientists and government leaders. The time of preparation is ending. The crossroads are here. You are no longer the architects of your fate. The message sent waves of panic through Earth's governing bodies. The first wave of shock had been met with hope. The idea that the aliens were perhaps peaceful guides, come to help humanity reach new heights. But these new transmissions were darker, more cryptic. What was the crossroads? What did the aliens mean by the end of preparation? Elena's mind raced as she attempted to decipher these new messages. She began to wonder whether humanity had truly been guided by benevolent forces, or whether the alien presence had simply been manipulating them for a much larger purpose. Her thoughts returned to the Keeper's words. The aliens are preparing you for a new phase. One that requires a choice. With mounting urgency, she reached out to her old colleagues, trying to make sense of the shifting narrative. Were the aliens leading humanity to a new era, or were they preparing them for something far darker? Then, a breakthrough came. The transmissions, while still cryptic, seemed to follow a pattern. Elena and her team discovered that the messages were constructed like a complex puzzle, each piece revealing a portion of the greater picture. One of the most unsettling discoveries was a sequence of images embedded in the messages, showing glimpses of strange, unfamiliar technologies, devices that seemed to bend the laws of physics. and in the corner of one of the images, Elena saw a familiar face, a figure that resembled the Keeper. It was at that moment that everything clicked. The aliens, or the beings behind them, had not just been watching. They had been shaping humanity's evolution, testing its capabilities, and preparing it for something beyond their comprehension. The choices they had been hinting at were not just a matter of diplomacy or peaceful coexistence. They were choices that would determine whether humanity was ready to join the larger galactic civilization, or whether it would be left behind. A knock on Elena's door startled her, pulling her from her thoughts. She opened it to find an old colleague, Dr. Javier Diaz, standing in the doorway. He was visibly shaken, his face pale. "Elena, we need to talk," he said, stepping inside. "There's something you need to see." "What is it?" she asked, suddenly filled with dread. Javier handed her a tablet, and as she read the information on the screen, her blood ran cold. A covert group within the world's governments had received an encrypted transmission that changed everything. The aliens had, in their last message, offered a choice, but it wasn't just for humanity. It was for every nation, every leader, every person on Earth. The aliens were preparing to unveil their ultimate proposal, a galactic federation. But joining this federation came with a price. In exchange for access to unimaginable technology and knowledge, humanity would have to agree to become part of a larger, interconnected civilization that stretched across the stars. However, there was a catch. The aliens warned that humanity's potential had yet to be fully realized, and if the choice was made too hastily, Earth would be subject to a greater cosmic judgment. "We have been watching," yes, the last message read, "but your future is still undecided. You must prove that you are ready to face the consequences of your actions, both past and future." Elena's mind raced. A galactic federation? Was this a chance to elevate humanity to new heights, or was it a trap? Was humanity ready to join such a civilization, or were they still too primitive, too divided? What would the consequences be if the choice was wrong? The next few days felt like a pressure cooker, as world leaders convened behind closed doors to discuss the gravity of the aliens' offer. Elena was summoned to one of these meetings, a secret gathering where the fate of Earth itself would be discussed. As she entered the room, she was struck by the weight of the moment. Every face in the room was grim, filled with uncertainty. They had received the same message, but no one seemed to know what to do next. "We're facing a choice, one that will define humanity's future," the UN Secretary General said, his voice steady but tinged with apprehension. "The aliens are offering us a chance to join something far greater than we are. But the price could be more than we're willing to pay. We need to make a decision, and we need to make it now." Elena spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. "We don't even know what we're really choosing. The aliens, whoever they are, have been guiding us for centuries. But how do we know they're telling us the truth? How do we know this isn't part of a larger plan to use us as pawns?" There was a long silence in the room. The question hung in the air like an invisible weight. Everyone was afraid to answer, but the truth was undeniable. No one knew whether the aliens had humanity's best interests at heart. No one knew whether this was a moment of unprecedented opportunity, or the beginning of a cosmic trap. Then, Elena looked around the room and saw something that struck her as strange. The faces of the leaders were not just anxious, they were determined. They were already preparing to make the decision, whether or not they fully understood the consequences. Humanity, Elena realized, was at the edge of something monumental, something it could not escape. No matter how uncertain the path was, the choice was inevitable. The world would have to decide whether to join the Galactic Federation, or face a future without the guidance of the aliens. The clock was ticking. As the days dragged on after the secret summit, the weight of the decision that loomed over humanity began to sink in. The message from the aliens, the encrypted transmissions, and the cryptic guidance they had provided, all of it had been building toward this moment. Earth had reached the crossroads, and the question was no longer one of if, but when the decision would be made. The Galactic Federation loomed large in the discussions, But as the world's leaders and scientists debated, there was an unmistakable undercurrent of unease. The idea of joining a larger, interstellar civilization was seductive. The promise of advanced technologies, limitless resources, and access to the knowledge of the stars seemed too good to ignore. But the cost? What would the cost be? Was humanity ready to face the demands of a cosmic society, one that might not share the same values or ideals? Dr. Elena Vasiliev had never been one to shy away from the truth, but as she sat in the crowded hall of the UN headquarters once again, she couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The weight of the world's decision rested on their shoulders, and no one in the room seemed to fully grasp the complexity of what they were about to do. The aliens had made their offer clear: join the Federation, or remain isolated and unprepared for the challenges of the future. A tall man in a dark suit stepped forward at the podium, his voice steady as he addressed the room. He was one of the key members of the secretive council that had been formed to navigate the alien contact. The global leaders were all present, and the world was watching through a live broadcast. "We stand on the precipice of history," the man said. "The aliens have been guiding us for millennia. But now, they've made their intentions clear. This is not just about science or technology. This is about our place in the universe. If we refuse, we risk isolation and the potential for conflict with forces beyond our comprehension. If we accept, we must adapt to their rules, rules that we do not yet fully understand." Elena felt a ripple of discomfort wash over her as the words sank in. They were already speaking as if the decision had already been made. They were leaning toward acceptance, but Elena's mind refused to let go of the doubts she had been harboring. The aliens, whoever they were, had orchestrated a careful, methodical plan, guiding humanity toward this moment for thousands of years. But why? Was it benevolent guidance, or were they simply preparing humanity for something more sinister? Do we truly know the extent of their influence? Elena spoke up suddenly, her voice cutting through the room. The eyes of the assembly turned toward her. She could feel the pressure, but she stood her ground. What if the aliens haven't been guiding us to help us at all? What if they've been shaping us into something they can use for their own purposes? What if we're nothing more than pawns in a larger cosmic game? Her words were met with a wave of murmurs. Many of the leaders exchanged uneasy glances, but no one interrupted her. "We've seen evidence of their influence," Elena continued. "But we've also seen the patterns of manipulation, the subtle nudges towards certain technological advancements, certain societal structures. There's more at play here than we realize." The room fell silent as the implications of her words began to sink in. The truth was undeniable. Humanity had been watched for millennia, shaped in ways they hadn't fully understood. The aliens' motives remained hidden, their ultimate purpose uncertain. "We cannot afford to make this decision lightly," Elena concluded, her voice filled with conviction. "If we accept the aliens' offer, we must do so with full knowledge of the consequences. We cannot simply jump into this new world without asking why we've been prepared for it in the first place." The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. The leaders, once eager to embrace the promise of interstellar union, now found themselves torn. What Elena had said struck a chord within them, something that had been buried deep beneath their ambitions. Could humanity trust these beings, who had been guiding them for so long, yet had never revealed their true intentions? It was at that moment that a strange, unexplainable event occurred. Without warning, a sharp, rhythmic pulse of energy shot across the room, crackling in the air like a static charge. It was brief, but it felt like a warning, an unseen force making its presence known. The pulse caused the lights to flicker, and for a split second, the entire room seemed to vibrate with an energy that was both unnatural and ancient. Elena's heart raced. The pulse was unmistakably similar to the alien transmissions, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just a message, it was a signal, a sign. She had felt it before, during her visit to the Arctic facility. It was the same strange, almost mechanical presence that had been guiding them, nudging them toward the choice they now faced. Then, a new transmission arrived. This one was unlike the previous ones. It wasn't encoded in geometric patterns or cryptic symbols. It was straightforward, clear, and chilling. You are at the crossroads. Choose carefully. Your future depends on this moment. If you choose to remain isolated, you will be left behind, vulnerable to the forces that lurk in the cosmos. If you choose to join us, you will face a new reality. There will be no turning back. The message was direct, unmistakable, but the words were laced with a deeper meaning that chilled Elena to the core. There was no room for negotiation here. The aliens were not offering a partnership. They were offering an ultimatum. Suddenly, the choice felt less like a hopeful leap into the future and more like a dangerous gamble. Could humanity truly face the unknown consequences of joining the Galactic Federation? What if this was all part of a larger cosmic plan? One that had already been set into motion long before humanity even realized it. As the leaders deliberated, Elena found herself standing at the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss. What if the price of joining the Federation was greater than they could imagine? What if the real danger lay not in refusing them, but in accepting their offer? Time was running out. The aliens had made their move. And now, the fate of Earth rested in the hands of those who still dared to question. The world was unraveling. Once the aliens' ultimatum had been broadcast across the globe, it became clear that humanity was at an inflection point, teetering between the unknown vastness of the galaxy and the safety of their isolation. The entire planet was now divided, nations, communities, even families, splitting into two camps. The first camp, composed of those who sought to join the Alien Federation, argued that Earth's survival depended on acceptance. To reject the aliens was to risk cosmic isolation, to fall behind in an ever-evolving universe. They believed that the promise of advanced knowledge, the technologies beyond human imagination, and the opportunity to become part of something much larger were too significant to ignore. On the other side were those who saw the aliens as an existential threat. These individuals, including many influential leaders and scientists, believed that the alien offer masked a hidden agenda. They saw the Federation as a trap, an opportunity for the aliens to manipulate Earth into serving their unknown purpose. What if this was the beginning of humanity being controlled, perhaps even enslaved, by an advanced race that viewed Earth as little more than a resource to be harvested? The debate was everywhere, on the streets, in government halls, on the news. The lines were drawn, and no one could agree. As the tension built, protests erupted in cities, with some advocating for peace and cooperation, while others rallied against what they saw as an invasion of humanity's sovereignty. Elena watched from the sidelines, a mix of disbelief and anxiety tightening her chest. The weight of the decision was consuming her, yet she could feel her own reservations about the aliens' true nature deepening. The pulse they had felt in the UN summit was only the beginning. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, as if they were being funneled toward a future that wasn't truly their own. The more she thought about it, the more she questioned the idea of joining the Federation at all. Was humanity truly ready to accept this unknown reality? Or had they been groomed for it without ever realizing? She found herself back in the archives of the Arctic facility, the one place where she felt she might uncover the missing pieces of the puzzle. There had to be something here, something that could shed light on what the aliens truly wanted. In the months since her first visit, she had combed through the facility's old files, but today, something caught her eye. It was a long-forgotten journal, a record from a human scientist who had worked there during the Cold War. His name was Dr. Mikhail Petrov, and his journal contained a troubling account. According to Petrov's notes, the facility had originally been established to study strange cosmic phenomena. But over time, the focus shifted. The journal suggested that the aliens had communicated with the Soviet Union, not as allies, but as advisors. Petrov had written about the alien influence on early Cold War technologies, as if the aliens had a hand in guiding humanity's military development, pushing them toward certain advancements, while subtly stoking tensions between superpowers. Petrov's final entry was haunting. They promised us power, knowledge beyond our wildest dreams. But I have seen the cost. They do not give without taking something in return. They are not our friends. They are not our benefactors. We are being shaped, controlled, and they are waiting for the moment when we are ripe for their purposes. I do not know what comes next, but I fear it will be our undoing." Elena's heart sank. Controlled? She couldn't deny the sense of dread that gnawed at her. Petrov's account confirmed her growing suspicion. The aliens had been subtly guiding humanity, not to help it reach its potential, but to prepare it for something that suited their larger agenda. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but they raised more questions than answers. Meanwhile, the global situation was deteriorating. The divide between the factions grew wider. New revelations emerged from within the alien transmissions themselves, offering more information, but these only deepened the ambiguity. On the one hand, the aliens continued to promise peace, advancement, and the enlightenment of humanity. On the other, they hinted at consequences for any who chose to reject them. In the United States, the government convened an emergency session, with military leaders speaking of preparing for a worst-case scenario. Was there a chance the aliens were bluffing? That the promises were only a means to an end? Meanwhile, nations like Russia, India, and China pushed back, seeking a more aggressive stance, demanding that the aliens prove their benevolence, rather than assuming it. The world, torn between fear and hope, was at the brink of an unprecedented decision. Amidst the chaos, Elena received another message. It was not from the aliens directly, but from the Keeper, the mysterious figure who had guided her to the facility in the Arctic months earlier. "You were right to question their intentions. You were right to see the cracks. But now, you must understand the full truth. There is more to the Galactic Federation than you have been told. The aliens have been preparing you for a reason, not for your advancement, but for your subjugation. You must make a decision. But the truth is this: you are no longer the masters of your own fate." The message sent a shock through Elena, shaking her to her core. The Keeper, the very one who had been part of the ancient order watching Earth, was now telling her the truth. The aliens were not here for humanity's benefit. They had been preparing humanity for something else. Her mind whirled. This had all been orchestrated. The advancements in technology, the subtle influences in history, the changes in society, all of it had led to this moment. Earth was on the cusp of being swept into something much larger, something that humanity had never fully understood. She could not allow the world to be manipulated any longer. Elena knew what she had to do. She had to reveal the truth, before it was too late. The next few days were a blur of frantic preparations. Elena reached out to her allies, scientists, leaders, and others who had begun to suspect the same truths. They had to act quickly, before the world's leaders made the fateful decision to join the Federation. As the day of the final vote drew nearer, Elena made a public statement. She would tell the world what she had uncovered, revealing everything she had learned, the dark side of the alien influence, and the truth behind the Galactic Federation. The time for uncertainty was over. Humanity needed to know the real cost of the choices they were about to make. And so, the countdown began. The choice would come soon. But it was a choice that would no longer just affect humanity. It would affect the very nature of existence itself. The days leading up to the vote felt like a blur of tension and anticipation. Elena's public statement had ignited a firestorm of controversy, sparking protests in every major city. Across the globe, people were divided more than ever. Her revelation about the aliens' true intentions cast a long shadow over the decision, but it also gave people hope. Hope that they could take control of their own fate, even in the face of overwhelming pressure. The United Nations was set to hold a final assembly that would decide humanity's future. The vote was to be held in a secure, high-stakes session with representatives from every nation present. If the decision went through, humanity would be invited to join the Galactic Federation, a bold new chapter in history that would forever alter the course of the planet. If they rejected the offer, Earth would be left to face the unknown on its own. Elena had never felt more alone in her life. The weight of what she knew, what she had uncovered, pressed down on her chest like a stone. The keeper's final warning echoed in her ears. You are no longer the masters of your own fate. The tension in the air was palpable as world leaders, scientists, military advisors, and dignitaries filed into the assembly hall. The debate had been long and bitter, filled with passionate arguments, impassioned pleas for cooperation, and stark warnings of the consequences of defying the aliens. There was a sense that history was unfolding before them, but no one knew how it would end. Elena sat in the back of the hall, watching as the leaders took their seats. The chamber was filled with murmurs and whispers. The weight of their decision was too great for many to process. Some clutched their papers tightly, eyes darting nervously, while others appeared calm, even resigned. Elena couldn't help but wonder how many had already made their decision. Were they really debating for the good of humanity? Or were they simply seeking the comfort of what the aliens promised: power, knowledge, security? It was then that the voice of the UN Secretary General broke through the murmurs, a single word that silenced the room. Vote. A cold hush fell over the assembly. Elena stood as the vote began. The process was methodical, each nation casting its vote, one by one. She could sense the fear in the room, the realization that whatever they chose would come with consequences they could not fully comprehend. There was no turning back. Elena glanced toward the main podium, where the leaders of the most powerful nations were seated. Their faces were grim, but there was a hint of resolve in their eyes. They had made their choice. When it was finally Elena's turn, she stood before the assembly, and her voice was steady as she addressed the room. I will not lie to you, she said. I have spent months uncovering the truth behind the aliens' offer. I have seen their manipulation, their subtle nudging of humanity toward this moment. The question we face today is not one of whether we accept or reject the aliens, but whether we will allow ourselves to remain slaves to a force that has watched us, shaped us, and ultimately, controlled us. We cannot allow fear to govern our actions. We cannot allow our desire for knowledge, power, or security to cloud our judgment. This is our world, our destiny. We must take it back. A murmur rippled through the room. Elena knew that her words would not go unchallenged, but she had spoken them because they were true. Humanity had been guided for so long, but the time had come for Earth to choose its own path. As the vote continued, the tension grew unbearable. It was a close race, a deadlock. The voices of those who had been swayed by Elena's words, those who feared the alien agenda, fought against those who saw the Federation as humanity's only hope. It seemed as though the very fate of Earth hung in the balance. Then, something happened. A soft, familiar pulse of energy rippled through the hall. Elena froze. It was unmistakable. The same energy she had felt before, the same pulse from the aliens. It was as if they were listening, watching the vote unfold, waiting to see how humanity would choose. The lights flickered for a moment, and a voice, low, otherworldly, boomed throughout the hall. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as she realized what was happening. Your choice is imminent, humans. You are not as free as you believe. The outcome will not change. We are your future. You have no other path but the one we have laid out before you. The voice sent a shiver down her spine. It was clear now. The aliens had been guiding the vote, watching the outcome in real time. They had been preparing for this moment, and whether Earth chose to join the Federation or not, they had the power to shape the outcome. The choice was always theirs. Elena's mind raced. This was no longer about the vote. It was about something deeper, something that went beyond any single decision. The aliens had created an illusion of choice, but the truth was clear. Humanity had never truly been in control. With a flash of clarity, Elena understood. The aliens were not simply observers. They were manipulators, pushing humanity toward the moment when it would be too late to turn back. Their offer of peace and prosperity was a carrot, but behind it was the stick of control. The true cost of joining the Federation was not just the loss of autonomy, but the surrender of human free will itself. As the final votes were cast and the decision was made, Elena felt a weight settle over her. The vote was in favor of joining the Galactic Federation. It was a slim majority, but it was enough. The assembly erupted into applause. Some cheered with relief, others with excitement at the promise of what was to come. But Elena stood in stunned silence, her heart heavy with the realization that Earth had just sealed its fate. And then, the aliens spoke again. "It is done. Your future begins now. Welcome to the greater universe." The words were final, and the pulse of energy that filled the hall seemed to vibrate through Elena's bones. There was no going back now. As the assembly dissolved into celebration, Elena felt a deep sense of loss. The future that had once been so full of potential, full of hope, now felt hollow. The aliens had won. Humanity's destiny had been sealed, not by their own choices, but by the subtle influence of an unseen force that had been watching them from the very beginning. The price had been paid, and though Earth's place in the stars had been secured, Elena could not shake the feeling that the real cost was something far greater than anyone could imagine. The reckoning had come, and the true story of Earth's place in the universe was only just beginning. Months passed since the vote that bound humanity to the Galactic Federation. The immediate aftermath was filled with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. World governments began to align with the new order, slowly integrating alien technology into Earth's systems, and public opinion was split. For some, the dream of becoming part of a larger cosmic community was a triumph. For others, the reality of surrendering so much autonomy, of knowing that the aliens had shaped humanity's very trajectory, left a lingering feeling of betrayal. Elena Vasiliev, once a voice of defiance, now walked a path between the worlds. Though the decision had been made, her own internal battle had not ended. She had told the truth to the world. The truth about the manipulation, the influence, and the questions still lingering about the aliens' true motives. But what had that truth truly achieved? The vote had swung in favor of the Federation, and now Earth was being swept into the currents of a much larger reality, one in which humanity's place was no longer in its own hands. The alien presence was everywhere now. Cities glimmered with technology that had been a dream only months ago. Medicine had advanced by decades, and new energy sources promised to end Earth's dependence on fossil fuels. Communication with alien civilizations beyond the stars had begun, and scientists marveled at the discoveries that came every day. Yet, beneath the surface, something gnawed at Elena, an uneasy feeling that the price for all of this was greater than anyone realized. It was during one of her quiet nights at home, her thoughts wrestling with the implications of the Federation's hold over Earth, that the Keeper reached out to her again. A soft transmission, encrypted but unmistakable. She was no longer surprised by the messages. They had become a part of her life. The Keeper had been silent since the vote, but now, there was a sense of urgency in the message. "You were right to ask the hard questions, Elena. You were right to see through the illusion. But now, the truth you uncovered is more dangerous than ever. The Federation is not just a network of civilizations. It is a hierarchy, a system of control. You were not the first to question them. Others before you have tried to resist. But they were silenced, erased. The Federation does not allow dissent." Elena's hands trembled as she read the message. Silenced? Erased? Her mind raced. Was this the fate of all those who questioned the aliens? Was humanity already on the path toward being nothing more than pawns in a game that spanned the stars? The truth about the Federation was far darker than even she had imagined. There was no time to waste. She immediately contacted the remaining few allies she had left, those who had shared her suspicions but who had not yet spoken out publicly. Together, they began to unravel the hidden layers of the Federation's true purpose. It was clear now that the aliens had been working in the shadows for centuries, manipulating history, technology, and even the very evolution of humankind. But what they had not anticipated was that someone like Elena would dig deep enough to uncover the truth. As they delved further into their research, they began to find the remnants of ancient civilizations, long gone but still marked by alien influence. Artifacts, cryptic symbols, and hidden structures spoke of a pattern, a recurring theme. Each time a species was on the brink of advancing to the stars, the Federation had been there, guiding them into submission. They had not come to Earth out of benevolence. They had come because humanity was approaching a critical threshold. A threshold that threatened the balance of power in the universe. Elena understood now. The Federation was not an alliance, it was a system. A system designed to harvest and control emerging species, to incorporate them into the fold of galactic society. Those who resisted were eliminated, erased from the timeline of the universe itself. But there was something else, something that the aliens had not counted on. Humanity was different. The ancient order had tried to mold Earth, to shape its people into something pliable, something controllable. But there was a force, a hidden strength in humanity that the aliens had never anticipated. The very chaos, the unpredictability of human nature, was a force that could not be easily bent. Elena realized that while the aliens had prepared humanity for this moment, they had also underestimated the power of free will. Earth had never fully succumbed to their influence. There were cracks in the foundation of the Federation, cracks that could be exploited. In the months that followed, Elena and her small group of allies worked in the shadows. They had no choice but to operate in secrecy, knowing that the alien presence was watching, always watching. But the more they learned, the more they uncovered the true extent of the Federation's manipulation. They knew that the only way to break free from the aliens' control would be to expose them, not just to Earth, but to the entire galaxy. The plan was risky, dangerous even, but it was the only path forward. Elena, once an observer, now had become part of a new resistance. She was no longer merely fighting for humanity's survival, she was fighting for its soul. She knew that the battle ahead would not be easy. The Federation would not let go of its prize so easily. But for the first time since the vote, Elena felt a spark of hope. Humanity was not just a pawn in a cosmic game. It had the power to break free, to carve out its own destiny, and to stand as equals among the stars. And so, the story that had begun with a single, powerful revelation of the alien presence, of their subtle influence over Earth, continued. The true war had only just begun. The Galactic Federation had made a mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to be free. Elena would ensure that they would learn that lesson, even if it cost her everything.